Please welcome back to The Late Show, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern.
Recently appearing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Jacinda Ardern gave America a taste of New Zealand. Kia ora koutou katoa, no mai hara mai. Today we're reflecting on Ardern's recent appearance on primetime US television, where she promoted Brand NZ, and as usual, Ardern came across as kind, intelligent and funny. But the image team Ardern created of Aotearoa reflects a very colonial idea of what this country is. Viewing Aotearoa as a product to be consumed and exported for profit initially drove colonization, and this interview highlights how this project continues today. Brand New Zealand is still used to exploit the ecosystems, animals, and humans of this country, and as with all colonial propaganda, this violence is said to be a good thing. Just a note, before we get into it, we're not doing this to bash on Labour. We're doing this to highlight the ongoing colonisation of Aotearoa and how our narratives feed into that. If this puts you off voting Labour, make sure you move your vote to better parties like the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, because Luxon's National Party is worse in all of these respects.
Okay, now let's look at how Ardern helps to create Brand NZ.
What do we buy from you?
Of course, we are very well known for our high-quality food and beverage products.
Sure.
So everyone knows, I hope, our high-quality dairy, beef. I actually have an entire esky of beef with me for you as a gift.
An entire what?
Cold bin of beef for you.
Thank you.
It is carbon neutral beef because a big part of what New Zealand is promoting to the world is we want people to feel good about buying our products. And so we need our values to be embedded in them. And so our values around climate change, sustainability, animal welfare, it's all there in what we do now.
Now, when I was down there in 2019, you and...
There's a lot to break down in that, but first I just want to note that the body language here is pretty interesting. She's looking down more than usual and seems a little bit uncomfortable. And at the end of her little advertisement, Colbert moves right on. He gives it absolutely nothing. Maybe it's because he doesn't even eat cows.
A lot better.
No, I don't eat anything with a hoof now, is my thing.
Oh, I like these rules.
I do. Nothing with a hoof.
Or maybe it's just because he's smart enough to see through this fluff.
So everyone knows, I hope, our high-quality dairy, beef.
How did Aotearoa, a land that didn't have any cows or animal farming until 200 years ago, become so well known for dairy and beef? Well, it's because colonial industries have been working really hard to erase Aotearoa and replace it with a giant farm. Settler colonists saw in Aotearoa the perfect opportunity to expand the empire's animal agriculture industry. This meant devastating Māori communities, stealing their land, plaguing them with diseases, and erasing their culture. This meant the destruction of ancient forests and their inhabitants. And this meant introducing to Aotearoa a brutal system of enslaving, breeding, and slaughtering animals. These realities of colonization are deliberately erased and replaced with made-up stories about how good we are. Colonial forces created Brand New Zealand in order to sell more products, which in turn perpetuated their violence. This is from Te Ara Encyclopedia. The Empire Marketing Board was set up in London in the mid-1920s to promote trade in the British Empire. It published a series of posters representing New Zealand as an idyllic pastoral land for the production of sheep, cattle, apples, and honey. During the 1940s, the cover of the New Zealand Journal of Agriculture sometimes represented the country as Britain's overseas farm. Like this poster showing a New Zealand settler dreaming of home, thinking of St. Paul's Cathedral as he fulfills his duty to the empire. Or this one showing a London woman with her ration book, a bombed building behind her with New Zealand saving the day. And so the violence of colonization and animal agriculture were reframed as a wonderful act of Christianity, just a bunch of hard-working settlers feeding Britain during hard times. These portrayals reflect settler colonial identity, but they erase Māori identity and history. Making out like farms have always been here erases the historical and ongoing violence involved. This erasure continues today with campaigns like Taste Pure Nature, telling people that our beef and lamb just come from nature. And of course, this erasure continues with promotions such as this one.
I actually have an entire esky of beef with me for you as a gift.
An entire what?
Cold bin of beef for you.
Thank you.
It is carbon neutral beef.
Here, Ardern is promoting the latest product from Silver Fern Farms, which is a farming and slaughterhouse enterprise. It's called Carbon Zero by Nature TM, and Jacinda Ardern has been promoting it in the States as part of her tour.
Silver Fern Farms and their net carbon zero beef represents both New Zealand values but also our aspirations when it comes to climate change.
Like the Taste Pure Nature campaign, they're again trying to make out like these are just products gifted from nature. And as we know, these aren't gifts of nature. They're spoils of war, colonization, and violence. Also, this carbon zero talk just narrows the whole conversation down to emissions, which is only just one part of a giant problem. It ignores what animal farming does to animals, rivers, soil, people. All of these conversations get erased, and instead the conversation gets narrowed down to just talk about carbon, emissions, and fancy certifications. In the end, Aotearoa keeps getting trashed.
It is carbon neutral beef because a big part of what New Zealand is promoting to the world is we want people to feel good about buying our products.
Her choice of words is very revealing here. It's about what we're promoting to the world and how we want people to feel when buying our products. Like the Empire Marketing Board, it's all about selling New Zealand to the rest of the world. It's not about our actual values.
So we need our values to be embedded in them.
Oh, it is about values?
So our values around climate change, sustainability, animal welfare, it's all there in what we do now.
Notice how carbon neutral becomes a catchphrase to mean all of these wonderful values? The facts speak for themselves. Our contribution to climate change is massive considering our tiny size. Our economy lives off inherently unsustainable exports of the most polluting, resource-intensive foods on Earth. And then we ship them all over the world. And she chucks on animal welfare too. Like, do I really need to explain that it's a bit of an oxymoron to mention the welfare of the individuals you've got chopped up in a chili bin? It's just funny how far they try and stretch this carbon zero thing. The reality is that NZ kills more animals per capita than almost any other country. We torture them with poisons and gases and knives on a mass scale. We chuck them in factory farm cages where they live a life of suffering. These are NZ's true values. And if this carbon zero thing is better than other forms of animal agriculture, well, the reality is that most of the animals people eat in New Zealand don't come from these carbon neutral farms. Most people are eating factory farm chickens or just your usual carbon heavy cows. Brand NZ sends a false image of Aotearoa. You could even call it misinformation. It's absurd that our Prime Minister is promoting this bougie as hell food while our own people struggle to buy food for themselves. What's the point of being a food producing country when many of our own people can barely afford to eat? We're not still pretending to believe in trickle down, are we? Because these giant animal agriculture industries are not feeding our people. They're the reason people are separated from the land and can't feed themselves. And they're part of the reason that wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few while the rest of us struggle.
And if animal agriculture wasn't bad enough, Ardern also made fossil fuels part of our identity.
Let's talk about what we're here to celebrate, is that New Zealand has opened again.
We are open and, welcoming guests to New Zealand is so much a part of who we are. Hospitality is part of our identity. We call it manaakitanga. So please come back and make us whole again. You'd be so welcome.
Oh, strong words here to describe tourism. This is an industry which relies on the colonial extraction and burning of fossil fuels, which drives climate change, wars, and inequality. Saying it's part of our identity cements our reliance on this unsustainable business model and takes us further away from being able to conceptualize circular economies that prioritize sustainable community resilience. It's also wrong to equate tourism with manaakitanga. Manaakitanga here is being used to promote money making, because let's be honest, when she says make us whole again, she means to make our economy whole again. Similarly to painting our farming industry as part of our identity, this carries the same colonial mentality of reducing Aotearoa to her money-making abilities. But the economy is not our identity, and manaakitanga isn't about making money. This misrepresentation of a Māori concept to sell brand NZ is another example of colonial erasure. Our kupu and concepts are being morphed into new meanings to suit the colonial state. Hospitality is only scratching the surface of this incredibly deep concept, manaakitanga. It should never be reduced to such simplistic translation, especially when the type of hospitality she's talking about is so deeply disrespectful to the environment. As a non-Māori in an authority position addressing an international audience, Ardern should be careful not to give a false representation of Māori concepts to people who have no other insight into our world.
Part of our identity, we call it manaakitanga.
Who's this we she's talking about? Many in Aotearoa would never use the kupu manaakitanga, and in fact are bitterly angry at the use of te reo Māori.
Kia ora, good evening everyone. Mihi nui kia koutou katoa.
We call it manaakitanga.
I'm giving you a welcome. That's right.
This gives the vibe that we are this harmonious bilingual society that has overcome their colonial tensions and have morphed into one single entity. But that's just blatantly not true. Reparations have not been made. This is kei te pai washing, or brown washing, a tool used to hide injustice.
So please come back and make us whole again. You'd be so welcome.
Well, I tell these people before, absolutely should go.
Ardern claims we're not whole without being able to manaaki tourists. Manaaki, which when broken down can mean to urge on, to encourage someone's mana. But if we're not whole, it's because we're not encouraging the mana of our own people. Tangata whenua fill up jails, struggle with homelessness, are dispossessed from ancestral lands, their babies abused in state care, and are overrepresented in just about every negative statistic there is. We're not encouraging the mana of our ecosystems or the animals we torture and slaughter. Why does she think encouraging the mana of visitors is what completes us, when in fact it's the lack of manaakitanga of our own inhabitants which is the source of division and suffering? This whole advertisement of an interview paints a false view of Aotearoa.
Take, for example, when Colbert asked her about our support of Ukraine.
It's about values, and in these moments, standing together, regardless of whether you're on the other side of the world or not, and showing that this is not a conflict that we're going to let happen in the shadows. We will speak up, we will speak against it, and stand together until it ends.
But of course, we know that we don't have consistent values when it comes to overseas conflict. She's literally on a talk show in a country that has caused more wars and deaths than any other country. Hello, they killed almost 1 million of my people, and Iraq still struggles today, almost 20 years later. It's great that we supported Ukraine, but let's not pretend it's because we have consistent values and don't shy away from addressing conflict. We let people suffer in the shadows all the time when it doesn't suit our political agenda. We collaborate with apartheid Israel, sell weapons of war ourselves, and of course value trade over ethics in regards to China's genocide of Uyghur people, just to name a few. Don't worry, there's more. And closer to home, we let our own people and animals suffer in the shadows without taking action. But that's the whole thing. Colonial states exploit everything and everyone that can be exploited in order to make mountains of wealth. Then they'll pretend like they're doing this because of values and stewardship. This helps to sell their products and maintain the industries exploiting us and others. And the cycle goes on. Once Aotearoa was exploited to produce as much as possible, the industry started relying on the colonization of other lands too. Today, our agricultural industry imports things like PKE, which contribute to the deforestation of Indonesian rainforests, and blood phosphate, a conflict mineral fueling the war on Western Sahara. This same thing happens with tourism and fossil fuels, which requires the ongoing colonization of other countries. Brand NZ helps to keep the cycle of violence going. The moral of the story is that inherently unsustainable business models necessitate ongoing colonization. Decolonize the story. Tell the histories of colonization so people know that none of this is nature's work. It's the deliberate and violent work of colonization. Don't let them hide the issues facing our people and animals, because once we see the issues, we'll have a much better chance of changing things. Ngā mihi nui, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Hope you enjoyed that. We're keen to hear your thoughts. Do you think Ardern's government can create the transformational change we need, Or are they just maintaining the same old capitalist colonial system? Let us know in the comments. Whawhai tonu e te iwi.